Welcome back, everyone. If you're tuning in, you're probably like me, fascinated by the gears that turn within a nation. And let's be honest, there's no single document that reveals more about a government's soul than its budget.
Right. Forget flowery speeches. Show me the money. The budget's a roadmap, laying bare where the priorities truly lie and where those precious resources are flowing.
Exactly. And in a democracy like ours, the watchdog over that roadmap, in theory, at least, is Parliament. But today's deep dive is all about digging into how much influence Indian MPs actually wield when those big spending decisions are being made.
It's a fascinating question, really. The power of the purse who holds it, how they use it, that's the heartbeat of any democracy.
Absolutely. We'll be using some insightful analysis from pasted text to really dissect what's happening in India's budget process. We'll pinpoint the sticking points, the areas where maybe things aren't flowing as smoothly as they could be, and then we'll explore potential reforms. Because those reforms, those are the tools that could actually reshape how this crucial aspect of our governance works.
It's about getting under the hood, understanding the mechanics. Because for anyone following national policy, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Totally. So think about it. Have you ever stopped and wondered how much, say, your elected representative actually has in those massive spending decisions? That's what we're here to unpack.
It all starts with understanding that the budget isn't just a bunch of numbers, it's a statement.
Oh yeah, it's a financial language telling the story of a nation's values, what matters to them.
Exactly. And in any democracy that's working the way it should, the legislature has a huge role in shaping that financial language.
You know, thinking back through history, that legislative control over finances has always been that essential tool, the thing that keeps the executive branch in check.
For sure. Because it's not just about being fiscally responsible, it's about ensuring transparency, making sure the government is truly accountable to the people they represent.
It makes you realize that the global landscape of budget making is so diverse. I mean, you have legislatures that are practically drafting line by line.
Yeah, they're right in the trenches.
While others are more like, okay, here's the final product. What do you think?
Just a rubber stamp.
Right. It makes you wonder, what's the real impact of those different approaches? What's that key principle that tells us why greater parliamentary engagement leads to better outcomes for a country?
I think a core principle is the idea of collective wisdom. You're bringing together a range of voices, perspectives from across the political spectrum to really scrutinize those financial decisions.
You're getting everyone at the table.
And when that happens, it's more likely that the budget actually reflects the diverse needs of everyone in the country, right? Not just one group. And that can lead to more equity, more stability overall.
So let's bring this all home to India. Because from what we're seeing in our source material, the way Parliament handles the budget right now has some, well, let's just say some interesting quirks. It seems like the executive branch have a very strong hold on how things are put together.
That's a huge point to understand. Unlike other laws where Parliament's input is sought out at different stages, the national budget, it's born within the executive branch.
In the halls of the finance ministry.
The finance minister and their top officials, they're the ones shaping it initially. Limited input from Parliament, and even sometimes limited input from other cabinet ministers until very late in the game.
It's interesting to compare that to what happens in other well-established democracies. Our source highlights the U.S., for example. There, you've got congressional committees that get really deep into the weeds.
Oh yeah, they debate, modify. It's a whole process before a final proposal even sees the light of day.
And then you've got Germany and Sweden. Their parliamentary committees do these thorough assessments, but they do it way earlier in the process.
Lawmakers have real influence from the beginning.
It feels like a very different level of involvement compared to what we usually see here.
And that, right there, that's a key difference. This lack of early meaningful input from Parliament in India, it creates a situation where their ability to really shape those core fiscal policies is restricted. By the time the budget is presented to Parliament, the major allocations, those strategic priorities, they're basically set.
They're baked in.
So it limits how much real debate can happen, how much they can truly influence the direction of things.
And then on top of that, there's the time crunch. It's this massive document full of intricate details.
A lot to digest.
And Parliament is supposed to thoroughly examine it, debate it, approve it, all within a pretty short window, typically between early February and the end of March.
Doesn't leave a lot of room for deep dives, does it?
Makes you wonder if there's actually enough time to give this document the scrutiny it really deserves.
It's a valid question, because when you're dealing with something as important as the national budget, That short time frame can be a real challenge. It can mean that the discussions, while lively, might lack that granular level of analysis that's needed to fully understand and maybe even influence the government's financial plans.
Now, we do have those departmentally related standing committees, the DRSCs. Aren't they supposed to be providing some level of parliamentary review?
In theory, yes, they're tasked with reviewing the demands for grants for all the different government ministries.
So it sounds like a crucial stage for parliamentary oversight.
It should be, but there's a catch. Their recommendations, they're not binding, meaning the government can choose to ignore them.
So all that review, all that insight, might not actually translate into any real changes in how the money is allocated.
Unfortunately, that's the case, and that can weaken the impact of their scrutiny. It's fascinating to compare that to places like Canada, Australia, or the UK.
Where the legislative committees have more teeth.
And they often have these dedicated budget offices that provide independent, expert economic analysis directly to the parliamentarians.
What about the Rajya Sabha? What role does it play in all of this?
When we think about the Rajya Sabha, that Council of States, it plays a vital role in checking and balancing the government. But when it comes to the budget, its authority is limited. It can debate the budget, raise concerns, offer suggestions.
But ultimately, the Lok Sabha has the final say.
Exactly. It boils down to the budget being classified as a money bill under Article 110 of our Constitution. That classification means the Lok Sabha has primary authority, and the Rajya Sabha can't amend or reject it.
So even if an MP has strong reservations about something in the budget, wants to change how funds are being used or how taxes are levied, their ability to actually make those changes is quite restricted.
That's a key takeaway here. In India, individual MPs don't have the power to directly alter the government's proposals on spending or taxation. Unlike some other democracies, like France or Sweden, where they can propose alternative allocations, our MPs lack that direct power.
And even within the Lok Sabha, with party dynamics and the ruling party's majority, it's tough for opposition amendments to gain any traction.
That's the reality.
So we've laid out some significant limitations here. The dominance of the executive branch in putting the budget together, the very limited time for Parliament to review it, the somewhat limited role of the committees in the Rajya Sabha, and the lack of direct power for MPs to make changes.
We've got to ask, what are the solutions? What reforms could address these weaknesses and give Parliament a stronger voice in shaping India's financial future?
Exactly. It's time to shift gears. What are the options on the table?
One major reform that keeps coming up is this idea of formalizing, strengthening pre-budget discussions.
Pre-budget discussions, interesting.
Instead of those informal chats that happen now, why not create a dedicated period for this, ideally during the monsoon session?
So parliamentarians could really get into the nitty-gritty of the nation's financial health, talk about broad budget priorities, and give input to the government early on.
Right. It's about shifting that parliamentary perspective upstream.
It's a proactive approach.
Exactly. This could be huge for ensuring the budget actually reflects what people need. It could lead to a more balanced allocation of resources across different regions, different sectors. It's about getting MPs' policy recommendations on the table before the budget is finalized.
More inclusive, more responsive. I like it.
Plus, it could help those different committees work together more effectively. Imagine better coordination, more informed scrutiny later in the cycle. There's talk of setting aside 5 to 7 days specifically for these pre-legislative budget discussions.
That's interesting. And then there's the other big one, the idea of establishing a Parliamentary Budget Office, a PBO. What would that entail?
A PBO would address a huge gap in our system. Right now, there's no independent, nonpartisan body providing in-depth analysis of the budget and the economy for our parliamentarians.
So they're kind of flying blind, relying on the information the government provides.
In a way, yes. A PBO, modeled after those in places like the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, it would be this invaluable resource.
A fact-checking machine for the budget.
That's a good way to put it. It would provide data-driven insights, expert economic forecasts directly to the MPs. They could analyze government spending, revenue projections, assess the economic outlook, evaluate long-term budget trends. They'd be equipped with research-backed proofs.
It's about empowering them with knowledge.
Exactly, giving them the tools they need to really understand the implications of these financial decisions.
So if you combine these two reforms, pre-budget discussions and a PBO, you're essentially shifting Parliament from a passive approver to an active player throughout the entire budget process.
You're flipping the script. Instead of being handed a finished product, they're involved in shaping it from the beginning.
And that's not just about changing procedures. It's about strengthening the very essence of our democracy, making sure budgetary decisions are a result of collective deliberation.
It's about making the process more transparent, more equitable, and in the end, fostering that crucial public trust in how our nation's finances are managed.
Because a truly democratic budget process goes beyond just efficiency. It demands active participation from the legislature, robust oversight at every step of the way.
These reforms, they're about restoring balance, giving Parliament the capacity to truly shape economic policy. It's about a governance framework that's more transparent, more democratic, and ultimately more effective in serving the needs of the people.
So, to recap, we've explored why parliamentary oversight is so essential for a healthy democracy. We've looked at the structural weaknesses in India's current system, and we've examined these potential game-changing reforms, pre-budget discussions, and the Parliamentary Budget Office. What we're talking about is not just procedural tweaks, it's about a more balanced, accountable, truly representative system of governance.
For our listeners out there, especially those of you gearing up for the UPSC exams, think about how a more engaged Parliament in the budget process could affect everyday life, the future of our nation. If our elected representatives had a stronger hand in crafting that financial blueprint, what policy areas might see the biggest changes?
It's definitely food for thought, especially for anyone following current affairs for the mains exam.
Absolutely. This deep dive was informed by the great analysis from Pasted Text, originally published in The Hindu.
Great stuff. If you found this discussion insightful, give it a like, subscribe to stay tuned for more deep dives, and hit us with your questions in the comments. We love hearing from you, and it helps us shape future discussions. Until next time.